She thought it was just a trip to buy a cake, but one whisper shattered everything she believed about her son. In Romania's quiet streets, shadows from America return and a mother's silence becomes the sharpest weapon of all. Lies will collapse. Families will fracture. And the truth will speak louder than any words. The whisper at the supermarket. Silence is the loudest truth. Please hit that like button and subscribe. I'd love to know what country you are listening from. Drop a comment below and enjoy the listen. The house was quiet after the dinner. Too quiet. The laughter had vanished, replaced by strained silence. Anka avoided eye contact, her parents moved cautiously, and Daniel paced the hallway like a man trapped in his own skin. Elena sat alone in her guest room, the journal open beside her, the photograph of David Mercer staring back. The lamp cast a pool of light across the desk, illuminating the blank page before her. She picked up her pen, her hand steady, her mind sharp. She began slowly, deliberately, each word chosen with care. Daniel, she wrote. I know what you did that summer. I know who you were with. I know the lies you told, the masks you wore, the way you mocked me when you thought I wasn't listening. You believed silence meant blindness. But silence is not weakness. Silence is preparation. Her pen scratched across the paper, the sound steady, relentless. She paused, remembering the cashier's whisper, the scarred man's face, the journal's confessions. You built your life on Mercer's promises. You thought Romania would bury the past. But the past follows. It always follows. She pressed harder, the ink darkening. You said I was clueless. You said I was pathetic. But I have seen more than you realize. I have waited longer than you know. And now, Daniel, the waiting is over. The letter wasn't long, but it was sharp. Each line cut deeper, not with anger, but with truth. Elena didn't accuse. She didn't scream. She simply revealed. Mercer was not freedom. He was danger. And you chose him. You chose the lie. You chose to bury me beneath your silence. But silence speaks, Daniel. And mine is speaking now. She signed her name at the bottom, her hand steady. Then she folded the letter, slid it into an envelope, and sealed it. The next morning, Elena walked to the mailbox at the edge of the courtyard. The air was heavy with mist, the cobblestones slick with dew. She placed the envelope inside, her movements calm, deliberate. The lake, he repeated, his tone careful. That was years ago. Elena's eyes sharpened. Yes. Years ago. But some summers never fade. She placed a folded photograph on the table. David Mercer's face stared up from the glossy paper, his hand gripping Daniel's shoulder. Anka's parents leaned closer, confused. Anka's eyes widened. Daniel's jaw tightened. Where did you get that? He asked, his voice low. Elena's reply was calm. From your journal. The one you left in the drawer. The silence was heavy. Anka's parents exchanged glances, sensing unease. Daniel forced a laugh. Mom, this isn't the time. Elena's voice was steady. The time is now. Because silence has lasted long enough. Anka's father frowned. Who is this man? Elena's gaze held Daniel's. David Mercer. A name from the past. A shadow from the lake. A man who promised freedom but delivered chains. Daniel's mask cracked. His voice rose, sharp. You don't understand. Elena's reply was cold. Then explain it. Explain why a cashier warned me. Explain why you meet scarred men in cafes. Explain why your journal speaks of debts and silence. Anka's mother gasped softly. Anka turned to her husband, her voice trembling. Daniel, is this true? Daniel's face flushed. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His mask was gone. Elena leaned back, her expression calm. You thought I was blind. You thought silence meant weakness. But silence is preparation. And tonight, I am prepared. Dinner ended in silence. Plates untouched, wine glasses half full. Anka's parents excused themselves awkwardly, retreating to the kitchen. Anka stared at her husband, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. Daniel sat rigid, his face pale, his mask shattered. Elena remained at the table, calm, composed. Her plan had unfolded exactly as she envisioned. The cracks had formed. The fortress was weakening. And soon, the collapse would come. Memories don't bring scarred men to cafes. This isn't the past, Daniel. It's the present. And it's unraveling. Daniel's mask shattered. His voice rose, sharp. You don't know what you're talking about. Elena's voice was calm, steady. I know enough. And I will know more. The room fell quiet. Anka's parents stared, unsettled. Anka looked between her husband and mother-in-law, confusion in her eyes. Daniel sat rigid, his face pale, his mask gone. Elena stood, her posture strong. You thought silence meant blindness. But silence is preparation. And I am prepared. She left the room, her steps deliberate, her resolve unshaken. The invitation had gone out quietly, almost casually. To Anka's family, it was just another evening of togetherness. To Daniel, it was a chance to prove harmony. But to Elena, it was the stage she had been preparing for, the moment where silence would transform into revelation. The dining room glowed with warm light. A chandelier cast golden shadows across the polished table, set with linen and silverware. Platters of roasted meats, vegetables, and bread filled the air with rich aromas. To anyone else, it was a picture of family unity. But Elena felt the tension beneath the surface. Every smile was rehearsed. Every laugh was hollow. Every gesture was a mask. She sat at the far end of the table, her posture straight, her eyes calm. Daniel sat opposite her, his smile broad, his voice smooth. Anka's parents chatted lightly, unaware of the storm brewing. Dinner began with polite conversation. Anka's mother asked about Elena's flight, Anka's father spoke of the harvest, Daniel translated cheerfully. Laughter floated across the table. But Elena's gaze never left her son. She watched the way his smile flickered, the way his hand tightened around his glass when she spoke. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice soft but deliberate. Do you remember the summer at the lake, Daniel? The room stilled. Forks paused mid-air. Daniel's smile froze. She greeted Anka's parents, thanked them for breakfast, and sat across from Daniel. He looked up, his smile broad. Morning, Mom. Sleep well? Elena nodded. I did. Though I found something interesting in the guest room. Daniel's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. Oh. What was that? Elena's voice was steady. A journal. Yours. The silence that followed was sharp. Anka's parents exchanged glances, sensing tension. Daniel set his cup down carefully, his eyes narrowing. Why were you looking through my things? Daniel asked, his tone calm but edged. Elena leaned forward slightly. I wasn't looking. It was there. And I read enough to know you've been carrying secrets. Daniel's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have read it. Elena's gaze held his. You shouldn't have written it if you didn't want the truth to surface. Anka's mother shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps this isn't the time, Elena raised a hand gently. It is the time. She began softly, her voice deliberate. Who is David Mercer? Daniel's eyes flickered. A name from the past. Not just a name, Elena pressed. A man. A man who promised you power. A man who stood beside you at the lake. Daniel's composure cracked. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, Elena said, her tone sharp. Explain why a cashier warned me. Explain why you meet scarred men in cafes. Explain why your journal speaks of debts and silence. Daniel's voice dropped, low and tense. Mercer was complicated. He offered things I thought I wanted. Freedom. Escape. But it came with chains. Elena's eyes narrowed. And those chains followed you here. To Romania. To this family. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. I left that behind. Elena's reply was cold. No. You buried it. And now it's surfacing. Anka entered the room, her face pale. What's going on? Daniel turned to her quickly, his voice smooth again. Nothing. Just old memories. But Elena's gaze stayed fixed on him. Memories don't make cashiers whisper warnings. She had lived her life in silence, believing it was strength. But here, her son described it as a cage. Further entries revealed more. Meetings in Romania. Conversations with men whose names Elena didn't recognize. References to the scarred one, the watcher, the debt. They think I can deliver. They think I can be trusted. But trust is a currency I don't have. Elena's stomach twisted. The scarred man from the cafe wasn't random. He was part of this network, this shadowed world Daniel had carried across borders. Tucked between the pages was a folded photograph. Elena unfolded it carefully. It showed Daniel, younger, standing beside Mercer at the lake. Both smiling, both confident. But Mercer's hand gripped Daniel's shoulder tightly, possessively. On the back, in Daniel's handwriting, the summer of freedom. Elena's breath caught. Freedom. The same word Lena had used in her journal. The same lie. She placed the journal and photograph on the bed, her mind racing. The cashier's warning wasn't random. Mercer's shadow wasn't gone. Daniel's mask wasn't just politeness, it was survival. Her son wasn't who she thought he was. He was entangled in something vast, dangerous, stretching from the US to Romania. And now, she was entangled too. Elena's resolve hardened. She would not confront him yet. She would not reveal what she knew. She would watch. She would wait. She would prepare. Because silence wasn't weakness. Silence was strategy. And the reckoning was coming. The morning after Elena discovered the journal, the house was alive with routine. Anka's mother prepared breakfast, the smell of fried eggs and fresh bread filling the air. Daniel sat at the table, sipping coffee, his smile easy, his voice warm. To anyone else, he looked like the perfect son. But Elena carried the journal's words inside her like fire. She had read too much to remain silent. Today, she would test him. Elena entered the kitchen, her posture calm, her expression neutral. The guest room was quiet, the kind of silence that pressed against the walls. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, the small leather-bound journal resting in her lap. Its cover was worn, the edges frayed, the pages swollen slightly from years of handling. It smelled faintly of ink and dust, a relic of secrets waiting to be unearthed. She hesitated before opening it. This wasn't hers to read. But the cashier's whisper, the scarred man, the wedding photo, they had already shattered boundaries. The truth was no longer private. It was necessary. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Daniel had always been meticulous, even as a boy. The first entries were ordinary dates, notes about classes, friends, places in the US where he had lived. But as Elena turned the pages, the tone shifted. Freedom is a lie. The lake was the beginning. Her breath caught. The lake. She remembered summers in the US, Daniel disappearing for hours, returning with damp clothes and evasive answers. She had dismissed it then, chalked it up to teenage rebellion. But here, in his own words, it was something darker. She flipped further, scanning lines that grew sharper, more urgent. Names appeared, some familiar, some foreign. David Mercer. He promised escape. He promised power. Elena's pulse quickened. David Mercer, the man in the photo, the shadow from her past. His name was etched into Daniel's journal, tied to promises of escape and power. Anka doesn't know. She thinks Romania is a fresh start. But Mercer's reach is long. He doesn't forget. Elena's hands trembled. Mercer wasn't just a ghost from the past. He was present. He was here. One entry stood out, written in darker ink, the words pressed harder into the page. I thought leaving the US would bury it. But the lake follows me. The voices, the deals, the silence. Mercer said silence is survival. But silence is also a prison. Elena closed her eyes, the words echoing. Silence. Survival. Prison. The warmth of the house was real, but beneath it lay tension. After dinner, Elena wandered through the house. The walls were lined with photographs, family portraits, weddings, holidays. She paused at one frame, Daniel and Anka, smiling at their wedding. But behind them, in the background, stood a man Elena recognized. The scarred man from the cafe. Her breath caught. She leaned closer, studying the photo. He wasn't part of the family. He wasn't a guest. He was standing at the edge, watching. Why was he there? Elena stepped back, her mind racing. The man wasn't just a stranger. He was connected. To Daniel. To Anka. To the family. Later that night, Elena retired to her guest room. The house was quiet, the only sound the ticking of a clock in the hallway. She opened the drawer beside the bed, searching for a pen. Instead, she found a small leather-bound journal. It wasn't hers. It wasn't Anka's. It was Daniel's. Her fingers trembled as she lifted it, the cover worn, the pages filled with neat handwriting. She flipped through quickly, catching fragments, dates, names, places. And then, a line that froze her, the lake was the beginning. Romania was supposed to be the escape. But the past follows. Elena closed the journal, her heart pounding. The cashier's warning. The scarred man. The photo. The journal. The pieces were forming. She sat on the bed, the journal in her lap, the house silent around her. The warmth of the family, the laughter, the hospitality, it was all real. But it was also a mask. Just like Daniel's smile. Elena's suspicion hardened into resolve. She would uncover the truth. She would peel back the layers of lies. And she would do it quietly, strategically, the way she had always lived. Because silence wasn't weakness. Silence was preparation. And the storm was coming. She replayed the day in her mind, the cashier's whisper, the phone call, the cafe meeting. Each piece was a fragment of a larger truth. She wrote in her notebook, supermarket cashier's warning phone call, urgent tone meeting with scarred man mask of politeness. Her hand trembled slightly, but her resolve hardened. She would watch him. She would collect the pieces. And when the time came, she would confront him with the truth. Silence had always been her strength. Now, it was her weapon. The in-laws' house stood at the edge of town, its walls painted a fading cream, its roof tiled in deep red clay. A grapevine stretched across the courtyard, its twisted branches heavy with autumn leaves. To Elena, it looked like a postcard, picturesque, rooted in tradition, welcoming. But as she stepped inside, she felt something else beneath the warmth. A subtle unease. Her daughter-in-law, Anka, greeted her with a smile, kissing both cheeks in the Romanian way. Anka's parents followed, ushering Elena into the living room. The air smelled of roasted peppers and fresh bread, the table already set with platters of cheese, cured meats, and steaming soup. "Sit, please," Anka's mother insisted, her voice kind, her hands busy arranging dishes. Elena smiled politely, taking her seat. The family's hospitality was genuine, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept replaying the cashier's whisper, the cafe meeting, Daniel's mask. Watch him. He is not who you think he is. The room was filled with laughter, conversation flowing in Romanian. Elena caught fragments of words, her limited understanding piecing together phrases: family, work, neighbors. Daniel translated occasionally, his tone cheerful, his smile perfect. But Elena watched closely. She noticed the way Anka's father looked at Daniel, respectful, but cautious. She noticed how Anka's mother avoided certain questions, changing the subject quickly. And she noticed Daniel's subtle glances toward the hallway, as if checking something unseen. Daniel stopped at a corner, pulling out his phone. Elena lingered in the shadows, watching. His voice was low, urgent, different from the cheerful tone he used moments earlier. She couldn't hear the words, but his posture betrayed him, shoulders tense, head bowed, eyes darting. He ended the call quickly, slipping the phone back into his pocket, his smile returning as if nothing had happened. But Elena had seen the shift. The mask. She followed him down the narrow street, her steps careful, her breath steady. He entered a small cafe, greeting the barista with familiarity. Elena waited outside, peering through the window. Daniel sat at a table, his back straight, his eyes scanning the room. He wasn't just waiting for coffee. He was waiting for someone. Minutes later, a man entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar across his cheek. He sat opposite Daniel, their conversation hushed, their faces serious. Elena's pulse quickened. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the intensity, the way Daniel leaned forward, the way the man's hand clenched into a fist. The barista brought coffee, but neither touched it. Their focus was elsewhere. Elena's mind raced. Who was this man? Why was Daniel meeting him in secret? And why had the cashier warned her? She pulled back from the window, her breath shallow. She didn't want to be seen. Not yet. After 20 minutes, Daniel left the cafe, his expression calm once more. He walked toward his in-laws' house, greeting neighbors, smiling politely. The mask was back. Elena followed at a distance, her eyes sharp, her mind recording every detail. The way he glanced over his shoulder. The way his pace quickened near the house. The way he paused at the gate, scanning the street before entering. Inside, laughter greeted him, his wife, her parents, the warmth of family. To them, Daniel was perfect. But Elena had seen the cracks. That night, Elena sat in her guest room, the journals spread before her. Elena Morris had always believed travel revealed truths. But she hadn't expected Romania to reveal hers. The supermarket was small, tucked between two narrow streets lined with old houses. Its fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow on shelves stacked with bread, fruit, and cakes. Elena moved slowly, scanning labels she couldn't read, her son Daniel walking a few steps ahead. He was smiling, chatting with the cashier as he paid. To anyone watching, he looked like the perfect son, polite, attentive, blending seamlessly into his wife's hometown. But Elena's instincts told her otherwise. As Daniel reached for the bag, the cashier's hand shot out, grabbing Elena's wrist. His grip was firm, his eyes urgent. He leaned close, his voice a whisper. Watch him. He is not who you think he is. Elena froze. The words were sharp, chilling, spoken in accented English. Before she could respond, the cashier released her hand, smiled politely, and handed Daniel the receipt as if nothing had happened. Daniel turned, oblivious. Ready, Mom? Elena nodded, her face calm, her heart pounding. She followed him out of the supermarket, the whisper echoing in her mind. 5 minutes later, she slipped through the back door, her steps quiet, her eyes fixed on her son. She watched him from the shadows, her breath steady, her mind racing. The cashier's words had opened a door. And behind it, Elena sensed a truth her son had buried since his time in the U.S. Elena slipped out of the supermarket's back door, her shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and bread from the bakery next door. She pulled her coat tighter, her eyes fixed on her son as he walked ahead, unaware of her presence. Daniel looked ordinary, hands in his pockets, a casual smile as he greeted a neighbor. To anyone else, He was the picture of a devoted husband, a respectful son-in-law. But Elena's instincts told her otherwise. She read quickly, her eyes widening, her lips parting in shock. "Daniel, is this true?" He turned away, his voice sharp. "It's nothing. Just her imagination." But Anka's voice broke. "No. It's not nothing. She's seen the journal. She's seen the photo. She knows about Mercer." Daniel's mask shattered. His voice rose, desperate. "I did it for us. For freedom. For escape." Anka's tears fell. "You did it for yourself. And now it's destroying us." Anka's realization, she backed away, her eyes filled with fear. "You lied to me. You brought me into this without telling me. You made me believe Romania was a fresh start. But it was just another lie." Daniel reached for her, but she pulled back. "Don't touch me." Her voice was sharp, trembling. "You've ruined everything." From the hallway, Elena watched. She didn't speak. She didn't intervene. She simply observed, her presence heavy, her silence louder than any words. Daniel turned to her, his voice breaking. "Why are you doing this? You're my mother." Elena's gaze was calm, steady. "Because you thought I was blind. Because you thought silence meant weakness. But silence is strength. And now, Daniel, you must face the truth." Anka's parents entered, their faces pale, their voices urgent. "What is happening?" Anka held up the letter, her voice trembling. "She knows. She knows about Mercer. About the lies." Her father's face hardened. "Daniel, is this true?" Daniel's silence was answer enough. The room collapsed into chaos, voices rising, accusations flying, tears falling. Daniel stood in the center, broken, his mask gone, his fortress crumbled. By evening, the house was fractured. Anka retreated to her room, her parents whispered in the kitchen, and Daniel sat alone, his head in his hands. Elena remained calm, her silence steady, her plan complete. She didn't need to argue. She didn't need to shout. The truth had spoken. Daniel's world had collapsed. His Maria. She read quickly, her eyes widening, her lips parting in shock. "Daniel, is this true?" He turned away, his voice sharp. "It's nothing. Just her imagination." But Anka's voice broke. "No. It's not nothing. She's seen the journal. She's seen the photo. She knows about Mercer." Daniel's mask shattered. His voice rose, desperate. "I did it for us. For freedom. For escape." Anka's tears fell. "You did it for yourself. And now it's destroying us." She backed away, her eyes filled with fear. "You lied to me. You brought me into this without telling me. You made me believe Romania was a fresh start. But it was just another lie." Daniel reached for her, but she pulled back. "Don't touch me." Her voice was sharp, trembling. "You've ruined everything." From the hallway, Elena watched. She didn't speak. She didn't intervene. She simply observed, her presence heavy, her silence louder than any words. Daniel turned to her, his voice breaking. "Why are you doing this? You're my mother." Elena's gaze was calm, steady. "Because you thought I was blind. Because you thought silence meant weakness. But silence is strength. And now, Daniel, you must face the truth." Anka's parents entered, their faces pale, their voices urgent. "What is happening?" Anka held up the letter, her voice trembling. "She knows. She knows about Mercer. About the lies." Her father's face hardened. "Daniel, is this true?" Daniel's silence was answer enough. The room collapsed into chaos, voices rising, accusations flying, tears falling. Daniel stood in the center, broken, his mask gone, his fortress crumbled. By evening, the house was fractured. Anka retreated to her room, her parents whispered in the kitchen, and Daniel sat alone, his head in his hands. Elena remained calm, her silence steady, her plan complete. She didn't need to argue. She didn't need to shout. The truth had spoken. Daniel's world had collapsed. His marriage fractured. His reputation crumbled. His lies exposed. And Elena had done it all with silence. The house was no longer a home. The warmth of family dinners, the laughter of shared stories, the illusion of harmony, all had evaporated. In its place lingered silence, heavy and suffocating. Daniel sat alone in the living room, his head in his hands, the crumpled letter beside him. His mask was gone, his fortress collapsed. Anka remained in her room, her tears muffled behind closed doors. Her parents moved quietly, their voices hushed, their eyes filled with disappointment. And Elena? She was calm. She had done what she came to do. Elena rose early, the sky painted in pale shades of dawn. She packed her suitcase slowly, folding each item with care. The journal lay on the desk, the photograph tucked inside. She didn't take them. They belonged to Daniel. They were his burden now. She zipped the suitcase, lifted it with steady hands, and walked to the door. Daniel appeared in the hallway, his face pale, his eyes hollow. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice breaking. Elena met his gaze. "Yes. After everything, you're just going to walk away?" Her reply was quiet, but sharp. "I don't need to stay. The truth is already here. And it will stay with you." Anka stepped into the hallway, her face streaked with tears. She looked at Elena, her voice trembling. "Why did you do this?" Elena's gaze softened. "Because lies destroy families. Because silence carries truth. And because you deserved to know who you married." Anka's lips parted, but no words came. She turned away, her shoulders shaking. Daniel's voice rose, desperate. "You've ruined me." Elena's reply was calm. "No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. I simply stopped carrying your lies." She stepped outside, the morning air cool against her skin. The courtyard was quiet, the grapevine heavy with dew. She walked to the gate, her suitcase rolling softly across the cobblestones. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The collapse was complete. Weeks later, whispers spread through the town. The scarred man disappeared. Anka filed for separation. Daniel's reputation crumbled, his name tied to Mercer, his lies exposed. Elena returned to the U.S., her life quiet, her silence steady. She didn't speak of Romania. She didn't speak of Mercer. She didn't speak of Daniel. She didn't need to. Because silence had spoken. And in the end, silence was the loudest truth of all.